extend a very warm welcome to all of you to the third Lok Vimarsha webinar. We are delighted to have you here with us this evening, and we are sincerely thanking you for joining us. Today's webinar is titled Education, Human Capabilities, and Community Knowledges, Learning from History, Heritage, and Memory. Before we begin, I would kindly request everyone to keep their microphones muted throughout the lecture to ensure a smooth and uninterrupted session. And we will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end where the participants are most welcome to ask questions and interact with our keynote speaker. So my name is SNEEHA, and it is my privilege to be moderating today's session. So to formally begin with today's program, I would now like to invite Mr. Verma and Dr. Shaktivala, among the founding members of SNEEHA, to deliver the introductory remarks about the organization's vision and idea behind the Lok Vimarsha webinar series. Over to you.
Thank you, Neha.
Thank you.
I am Dr. Shaktivala, and we are happy that so many young generation, future of our society, they are interested and they are doing all our jobs because you are also showing us some direction. Thank you for that. And I will welcome Mr. Hemant Verma for his welcome address. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shaktivala. Thank you very much. My name is Hemant Verma, and I'm Joint Secretary of SNEEHA. On this occasion, I welcome very warm welcome to Dr. Surendra. So thank you very much for giving us time and the SNEEHA team to learn something from you. And the topic that is shared with us is about the knowledge, the human capabilities, and the society, the community, how they from the past, from our historical perspective, how we can learn from them and how we can advance what has been there earlier and what we can really take from that perspective. So I would, in the starting, I would like to give a brief introduction to the SNEEHA. I think I am audible to everybody.
Yes.
Yes.
So SNEEHA was conceptualized and then formed in around 5 years back. This is a society. SNEEHA is Society for Sustainable Development, but it is basically taking a cue or taking a the basic concept behind developing the SNEEHA is that we all like-minded people, we came forward, professionals, we came forward. We see that we take the advantage of Vedic philosophy. We look at this the earth as a mother earth, and we in our own spheres, Dr. Shaktivala, myself, and the other team members who has actually formed this, we said that we have been doing for UN agencies and other international agencies, government of India. We have been doing a lot of projects for development in different areas, for child health, for education, for society development, industrial development, environment, etc. But can we now, with that all knowledge, can we now do something at the grassroots level? We can really deliver, the last mile connectivity we can deliver to them. So then we form this particular society, and there are so many areas wherein this SNEEHA works. Primarily, we have taken, because some of us are from UN background, so we have taken UN Sustainable Development Goals as our, the indicative goals which we would like to progress on and deliver on this area. So, when we were working on these areas, hello. So then we thought of, also including tourism, heritage, this area also in our agenda. And we were presently we are so happy that we did it because because of that particular, we could learn so many things, what we call today the knowledge management, but we when we go back to our historical, roots, we see what we have present is very less, which was actually what used to be there earlier. And Mr. Soham Datta is, actively working with his team and with his colleagues in this direction, and they have been bringing a lot of new knowledge and new and ancient knowledge with a new perspective and activities too. And in that series, we are happy to have you, Dr. Surendra, also today with us. And though there's no ground we have on the history, but in the last sessions also we attended fully the sessions, and we are looking forward to learn a lot from you, because it is not that historical knowledge is only, is only the, what do you say, is religious part, but that can be connected in all that. It is economics, or it is development, or it is infrastructure, whatever. I mean, so it contributes to society in all the areas. So we are very happy, and I once again welcome you for this session. So back to Neha. Thank you very much. Back to Neha.
Thank you, Mr. Verma and Dr. Shakti Bala for the insightful introductory remarks. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I would like to briefly mention one of SNEEHA's important heritage initiatives, the Memoirs of Doon project. The Memoirs of Doon project is a research and documentation initiative dedicated to exploring the historical, cultural, ecological, and the lived landscape of the Doon Valley. And it seeks to preserve region's diverse heritage before it gradually fades from public eye. Also, one thing I'd like to mention कि ये सेशन द्विभाषीय है, तो आप अगर आगे जाके आपको कुछ समझने में दिक्कत हो रही है इंग्लिश में, ये कुछ भी है जो भी है, तो आप अपने सवाल हिंदी में भी पूछ सकते हैं. Right. So, in many ways, today's lecture resonates closely with the vision of Memoirs of Doon, as it encourages us to think about education as something that is enriched by history, heritage, memory, and the knowledge embedded within the communities. It is now my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker for today's session, Dr. Surendra Kumar. Dr. Kumar is a distinguished historian and faculty member in the Department of History, University of Delhi, with more than 20 years of teaching experience. Over the course of his academic career, he has inspired generations of students throughout his commitment to rigorous scholarship and meaningful classroom engagement. His research spans a wide range of themes, including medieval Indian society, the medieval Deccan, social movements, African diaspora studies, military labor, the history of emotions, and intellectual traditions of Gandhi and Ambedkar. His teaching reflects a deep engagement with historical inquiry and its relevance to contemporary society. Beyond his academic contributions, Dr. Kumar is widely respected as a strong advocate for students' and teachers' rights, consistently emphasizing the importance of an inclusive, democratic, and socially responsive educational movement. His work reminds us that education is not simply about the transmission of knowledge. Rather, it is equally also about nurturing critical thinking, social responsibility, and human values. It is truly an honor to welcome him to today's webinar. Today's lecture invites us to reflect on a question that is becoming increasingly important in our times. How do we cultivate an education that is rooted not only in institutions, but also in communities, histories, and lived experience? Education is often understood in terms of classrooms, textbooks, and formal systems of learning. Yet, some of the most enduring forms of knowledge are created, preserved, and transmitted beyond these spaces through oral traditions, collective memory, and cultural practices, including the local ecological knowledge, as well as the everyday experiences of communities. History and heritage help us understand how societies have generated, preserved, and passed on knowledge across generations. For us, this conversation holds particular significance to the context of Uttarakhand, the region's rich traditions of oral narratives, sacred landscapes, temple cultures, pilgrimage networks, folk practices, traditional ecological knowledge, and community stewardship of forests and water resources represent living knowledge systems that have evolved over the centuries. These traditions continue to shape local identities, social relationships, and the ways of understanding the world. In this sense, Today's discussion goes beyond history as an academic discipline. Rather, it invites us to think about history, heritage, community knowledge, which can together enrich education, strengthen human capabilities, and contribute to more inclusive, culturally rooted, and sustainable futures. To guide us through these important ideas, we are privileged to have with us our keynote speaker, Dr. Surendra Kumar. And without taking any more of your time, I warmly invite him to deliver today's keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Neha. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. First of all, I sincerely express my thanks to Sakti Balaji and Hemanji and all other worthy members who are engaged in various activities as outlined by the SNEEHA. Uh, and I also thanks to so many students who are also joining us today in this program. Obviously, it's a very vast topic. It's a very vast topic, and though I will be speaking in English, but wherever if you feel it is required to speak me in Hindi also, then that can also be done. Secondly, this is how we have developed our interactions, that during our interaction, if I will be, that's how we have, organized ourselves. So yeah, I will be putting some of, issues, questions. So I hope some of our, worthy members will join and they will be responding to it. What I will be also doing at the same time, I will be sharing a PPT, though it's not a PPT based, interaction, it's largely interaction. Yes. So, but there is something which I wanted to, yes, Neha, is it visible?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yeah. So on my screen, I'm only able to see this. So wherever, if you find any problem, then let me know. There was something inherent in sharing this my idea with reference to this topic, education, human capability, and community knowledge. Then I realized some visuals are something very important when we try to understand this theme in an expansive manner. Now, let me start this way because it's a very vast topic, and I will try to frame it and try to cover it as per the given theme. So now, first of all, when we talk about human beings or beings, beings means other than all living beings. Or if I say what is the existence, so human beings, and the entire existence. It covers so many things, not only the human beings. So the way we try to understand the world and the way we try to conceptualize the education, it has somehow, put human being at the epicenter of entire conceptualization. And the moment we have put up human being, at the center of the entire conceptualization, it creates larger, issues. So a world existence which is perceived, analyzed from the perspective of the man, the human being, or the I, or which is analyzed from a perspective where all of us are, whether we are the human being or the living being or the plants or the animals or whatever else is existing in existence, is considered continuously contributing to the making of this existence. You see, in everyday life, there are so many words which we use. Whenever you're going to a program, then you use the word bheed. हम लोग word use करते हैं bheed. Now, what does this bheed word conveys to us? The bheed word or the rush. These days we use so many conceptualizations and the words which we are, learning through various sources. And obviously, social media is also one of the important source through which we are learning and imbibing those words. But a deeper analysis of this word communicates us something which is very essential when we try to understand the very idea of the being and the very idea of education and the very idea of existence. So the entire history or the the life of the human being is a life which shares which can be classified at the very broader level in two parameters: a life which we pass within the frame of time, and a life which we pass beyond the frame of the time. Because these are two very different things: something which we do within the frame of time and something which we do beyond the frame of time. Now in this picture you see there are two different types of, on the one hand, a young man is going with mobile, and there is a sense of time, there is a sense of engagement, and so many responsibilities. In another picture you see a daughter is caring his father. Now this relationship, when it requires the care, it cannot necessarily operates within the frame of the time. Our existence operates sometimes within the frame of time, but sometimes outside the frame of time. In fact, the life of the human being itself, when we say the human being has passed away, I perceive that, it's not passing away. It is a journey which we have, covered within the frame of time constructed by the human being, and a journey which is outside the frame of time. So the question arises: what educates a human being? Or which part of the human being has to be educated? That they rises because there are activities which are based on the emotions, on the dimensions where time can be sacrificed, and there is a space of the life of human being where time cannot be sacrificed. You see, so so in a space where time cannot be sacrificed, if you sacrifice the time, then you have to pay a lot of but in a phase of your life where you have to sacrifice your time, if you do not sacrifice, then that can create pain and agony in your life, till the one is alive. So what educates a man or a human being and what has to be educated? It's at the outset we must understand that what are the issues we are taking up, those aspects of time which is something constructed within, and those which is outside the frame of time. Now when we are talking, we will come back to I will come partially with the respect to Uttarakhand, but then let me say, when we are talking about Uttarakhand and when we are talking about a metropolitan city, or when we are talking about what we are talking about, you see, a city or a town, or if I say the homogeneous evolution of the human being, what is happening in the world, in the contemporary world, is a homogenized, imposed way of development. Human beings have evolved heterogeneously. The diversity of the geography, the diversity of the cultures have evolved us very differently. But what is happening now is that somehow our evolution, our consciousness is now being shaped by those structures which are created by the human being, and those structures which are somehow they are not necessarily the living being. So if I say we are talking about Uttarakhand, it's a space which is dominated by the nature. It's a space which is dominated by the living beings other than the human being, but also human beings. So, the domain of what has to be educated and what is the education it cannot be, restricted, conceptualized within the frame of institutionalized education, one. And then it cannot also be conceptualized within the frame of the activities which are part of the human life. Rather, our education is something which is inherently connected, linked with the surroundings within which we are placed. That is the one aspect we have to understand, that education is not something the manner in which sometimes we are told by the system, but education is a far. So if you are located in a Uttarakhand space dominated by the nature, if you are located in a metropolitan city dominated by certain other type of structures, these spaces educates you, these spaces educates you, and they have their own tendencies which are gradually we develop as a human being. Now again, there are two images which in the next one is the image of Sri Harmandir Sahib and another is the Dargah of Ajmer. Suppose for example, as a human being, when we're visiting, suppose across the religion or within the religion also, no doubt, if somebody is visiting Golden Temple, or somebody is visiting Dargah of Ajmer, or somebody is visiting Tirumuti Temple, or somebody is visiting a church, what happens when we are entering into these spaces? I have elaborated about when we are talking about nature or the structures, life saved by the structure or life saved by the nature. But then there are spaces which have continuously evolved with our evolution. That is the those spaces which saves our consciousness, right? Though, but not necessarily, though the way we conceptualize modernism, which I will come later on, we have placed even the spirituality and the science in a contradiction, right? But that is a different issue. Right now, if I say what happens when we enters into these two spaces, anybody can tell कि अगर हम गोल्डन टेम्पल जा रहे हैं, अजमेर की दरगाह जा रहे हैं, तिरुपति मंदिर जा रहे हैं, we are going to a church, चाहे हम उस धर्म के हों, चाहे अक्रॉस रिलीजन हो, what happens to us? क्या होता है? Anybody can respond.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, we feel very relaxed.
Yes, but that is one part. Okay. So, but the point is, why do we feel relaxed? That's another issue. So, but let me take this argument and then let's move forward. So something happens to our body, right? And I will only deal with those issues, which we can examine as a social scientist. I will not take up those issues which are outside the domain of social scientists, which we cannot discuss in the academics. But I'm bringing. So, what is a human being? See, our human being, before we come to the society, what is a human being? And then there are three important things which is existing in the human being, which which have been observed by the the science also, social science also, that the manner in which our activities, our life, are expressed, they are distinctly, can be said to have generated from three different, origins which exist in our body, the body, the mind, and the soul. Now, I will not talk about, how do we explain this, but then I will explain you how all of us feel, how the existence where we are placed, we are placed in Uttarakhand, you are placed in a city, you are placed in a religious place, or in any other place also, how these spaces educate us, right? And how they generate something which is already existing in our mind, in our body, right? Now, let me explain. For example, our body, the comfort, the body requires certain things, and then over a period of time, as the body grows or as the body matures, a human being of 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, the manner in which our body, evolves, matures, when we complete our journey, the requirement of the body changes over a period of time, and that can be observed, right? I don't think can be any dispute on that. So your body has a tendency, in summer you have a different type of dresses, in winter you have different type of dresses, right? Because your body need protection against the winter, so you wear something. In summer you don't require. If you are in the Uttarakhand, for example, throughout 12 months, you may require, sweaters, etc. So these are the demands of the body which you have to address. So one part of, how when we educate something that reflects is that body, over a period of time, it changes its demands. But you have also seen sometimes that a man or any even woman or any other human being having his requirement of the body at the age of 20 can behave in the same manner at the age of 60, which he is not supposed to, he is not supposed to do. Then this is not something happening with the body, it is happening with your desires. It is happening with your mind. So our evolution is in such a manner that, when we are a child and when we are a grown human being and when we have become, mature, I will not say old, when you have become mature, it's a journey of immaturity to maturity, not the young and old. So in this process of immaturity to the maturity, if a human being of 60 years is behaving as a human being of 20 years, then it is not the problem which is operating and emerging inside the body. It is emerging in the mind, right? So that is one aspect. When we're talking about education, then there are three different components within the, the life of the human being. The mind, body, and the soul. This is the image, of the Baba Farid. And it's such a stage of the spiritualism, where, he does not refuse a crow. He's saying, crow, you can eat all my body, and but you don't take out my eyes, you see, because I want to meet my God, my Lord, etc., etc. Now, this phase of life is also a phase of life where the feeling is something which is not existing in the mind, which is not existing in the body, which is something existing in a space in the body where you feel a different kind of. So, first of all, what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to situate the very, the very living being that is called the human being, about whom and with reference to whom we are talking about the education or the capabilities. That what is a human being? So when we're talking about this aspect, then we have to, address these issues that we get educated in so many ways, continuously so many ways, but whether we are emphasizing those aspects of the education. So definitely, when we are talking about Uttarakhand, then you have to have a different different strategy, different issues of the education. You cannot have the same issues of education in Uttarakhand as you can have in Delhi, for example. But my another question arises. So therefore, education has to be organized in such a manner. When you read John Dewey, Democracy in Education, one of his very, very important book, he says, what is education? And he says the education should be, an educator should be conceptualize his education as a farmer. And what does a farmer do? When a farmer is doing agrarian activities, he has to suppose, for example, a farmer wants to produce wheat, or if a farmer wants to produce a makkah or any of the other product, can he decide on his own that, okay, this year I want to, produce wheat or makkah or, etc., etc. But he cannot do on his own. He has to examine the availability of the water. He has to examine the nature of the soil. He has to examine the season within which he is sowing the seeds. So therefore, John Dewey says that education cannot be, given homogenized format which can be imposed on any society or within the societies which are existing within a given society. there may be multiple societies within a society, but you have to take into consideration. So farmer, when he is doing agrarian activity, he does not organize that activity in contradiction to the requirement of that agrarian activity. He doesn't do that, against the availability of water. He doesn't do against the availability of the air. He doesn't do against the availability of the nature of the soil. He takes everything into consideration, whether soil is perfect, whether, weather will be perfect, whether the rainy, etc., etc. Not going into detail. So therefore, the education has to be organized, conceptualized according to, the requirements of the, society, which we may take into consideration. Now, when we are talking about education and the society, now what is a society and what is the community? Now, at the outset, these words may be very obvious to us. Society is what is the issue to discuss the word society, right? But then there is a larger issues. Paulo Freire has used the word in his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Not for Paulo Freire, somebody else, I forgot. Michel Trulot has used this word. That words are not essentially convey the concept, and concept doesn't always communicate the word. The meaning of the word and concept, changes over a period of time. So what is a society? And for us, what is the meaning of a society? Now, for example, these four people who are sitting here, for example, let's imagine hypothetically that they are sitting in this room for next 100 years. Will it constitute a society? Anybody can respond. If they are sitting for 100 years in this room in the same manner, will it constitute a society?
No, sir.
No. Okay, fine. Now, there is another image where, these four people of a family, now suppose they are sitting here for next 100 years. Will it constitute a family?
Not them as well, sir.
So, what does it inform us? That the presence of the people does not constitute a society, or persons existing in the relationship also does not constitute a family. Proximity of the people does not constitute a society. Proximity of the people in a family does not constitute a family. So we have to understand what is a society. Generally, our assumption about the society, about the family is either it is based on the blood relationship, one, or it is based on the proximity. If certain people are staying in certain areas, then definitely we say, no, this is a society. And that can be further classified in so many denominations which may be existing, but I'm not going to detail about that. But somehow, and this is the argument of John Dewey, again, I said Democracy in Education, and it's a very wonderful book. I think all the students and all of us, sometimes whenever we are comfortable, must go through it. So, what is an education and what should be the aim of the education, right? Because what is happening in the education, which is, being, imbibed through the institutional mechanism, is something which is not addressing these two aspects. The education which we are, and our society, and not only our society, the world society is in crisis. Now, this I'm talking with reference to only the human beings. Remember, as I said in the very beginning, society means, and the world means, and so many things. But I'm talking about a very minor part of the, that entire existence. Human beings are a very small part of the entire existence. Remember, sun and moon are staying for thousands and thousands of years. Our lifespan is hardly 70 or 80 or 90 years. So human being is nothing. So now, when we go into this debate that, if education fails us to recognize what makes a society, and if education fails us to recognize what makes a family, right, then what is an education? And is it only about career, which largely these days, we are conceptual education in terms of career, in terms of placement, in terms of management of resources? That's the idea of education. And then another aspect which, questioned by the Paulo Freire, can education be neutral? So when you read Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, he argues that largely the world education, and definitely Paulo Freire was sent to jail, he was exiled for more than 20 years for writing such a book. So, but he questioned that education, which largely develops a conformity among us, right? We emerge, as a something to work for a system without recognizing whether that system is working for the human being or the living being. Or so Paulo says education can be for the conformity, and education can stand for the subversion. It can lead to change, it can lead to revolution, it can lead to resistance against those processes which inhibit the growth of the human being or the living being. But when we move further within the academic circle, within the institutional mechanism, then there is knowledge which is coming out of the text, the textual based knowledge, and there is knowledge which is coming out of the experience. And all of us are very much aware, and we generally give the example of Kabir, Saint Kabir, right? He didn't have the textual based knowledge, but the kind of knowledge which he had generated, बावन आखर जगते रहे, सब कुछ इन्हीं में है, ये आखर गिर जाएंगे, वो इनमें नहीं। कबीर कहते हैं कि ये 52 अखरी दुनिया है जो इंसान ने बनाई है, पर मैं जो कह रहा हूं उस 52 अखर से बाहर है. Now that is something which he argued in that. So without having textual knowledge, his experience generated his consciousness to that level where, so whether our textual based knowledge is training us, or whether the learning which we get from the education is a training or education, these are two very different things. Whether we learn from our institutions training how to train our body to behave in a particular manner, or it develops us through all those three phases which we discussed, mind, body, and the soul. So education has largely transformed into a process of training of the body, not the mind, not the soul. So we have to also understand, when we are talking about now the phase within which we are conceptualizing this idea of education, the idea of conformity, the idea of training, also brings us to very close that why this education, the process of education, has transformed into a training process, a mechanized process, a homogeneous process. And how world has existed before 1492 and how the world has existed after 1492, the time period when we try to conceptualize the modern time period, I do not believe in this classification of modern and pre-modern. I largely classify in terms of a life which is within the domain of time and a life which is outside the domain of the time. But let me argue, and then let me take this issue. This, all of us have been told, and we believe that we are modern people, and modernity start from a certain time period. All the educational history books and all other books have their own timeline. When did a human being in India or in the West or in Africa or Latin America became modern? But when we read certain texts, then we do find that modernity, the so-called modernity, has created the largest Holocaust in the history of the human being. 90% people of the Latin America were killed with that modernity which Western Europe introduced in the Latin America. So this modernism and in fact the revolutionary people of the American Revolution, they were also slave owners. So they were revolutionaries and they were slave owners. Similarly, we got this idea of liberty, equality, fraternity from France, but France became propagated this idea of liberty, equality, fraternity within the France, but outside the France they promoted the colonialism, the various brutal suppression of the human being. So this very idea of modernity is something which is not, as I said in the very beginning, the society, community, modernity. These are very complicated words. We cannot take them as we have been told that, they have the one meaning. They have different meanings. And it depends upon us how we have been exposed to these conceptualizations. Now, that is one part. Now, apart from that, how do we conceptualize the world? No, whether a society in any country or in any part of the country or a society outside any country and across the world, whether they influence each other, whether the issues of society education, they shape each other, or world exists as a segregated, space. Now, there is another argument that human beings have evolved in migrations. And one of the dominant aspects of the world society across the world is that now societies have been migration-based societies. You see, when we Raymond Dart, when we go through the various, people who examined who trace the evolution of human being from the Australopithecus to Neanderthal, they have examined that the continuous, evidences of continuous evolution of human being has been traced in Africa, etc., etc. So, how migrations have shaped the society, that is one of the another issue which we have to understand. Now, if I say, as I said in the very beginning, before 1492, we find example of the largest migration of Goths in the Western Europe. And it was a very warfare oriented, and ultimately it got transformed into emergence of what we find today, France, England, etc., etc. This migration of the Goths in the Roman Empire gradually led to the emergence of a new society, and all these languages, which are now part of the Western Europe, are part of those Gothic languages. So migrations of the human being through the war, through the trade, etc., etc., have been a continuous part of a society. But what has happened after 1492? This is the house of a governor in Latin America. And if you see this house, Montejo's house, if you see this house, this is the house of governor in the Incas Empire, Southern America, you find that they have constructed the images of the the European people, and there are standards of the human being. Now, the people who are coming from the Spain and Portugal, this is particularly from the Spain. If you find at the feet of the human being, now these are all the modern men, wearing all the sign symbol of the modernity in their hand, they are standing, and this is the main gate, entry gate of the governor of that, Montejo house. So, migrations have been a continuous process. But what has happened in this so-called idea of modernity and the migration, that the entire world is now being conceptualized in a particular manner, and this conceptualization have brutalized our species. This very idea of first world, second world, third world, etc., is something which have been imposed on all of us through the prism of the West. But there was no West before 1492. So, our entire education system and our entire conceptualization of the society is something where we vertically get connected with the West. But what we do find historically, that this emergence of modernism in the West is inherently linked with the brutality and the dehumanization of societies, which which are existing outside the Europe. So what comes out from this this first interaction, it informs us that world is a mediated space, and this mediation, this evolution has come through brutality and Holocaust. As I said, more than 90% people of the Latin America wiped out. I'm not talking about Africa, and I'm not talking about Asia right now. I'm only talking about Latin America, where historians have worked on it, and I don't have time to discuss here. More than 70 million people were killed. Etc., etc. You can compare all those things. But so the world is not a peaceful space as we are being told and as we perceive, but world has evolved in so many manner, and one of the manner in which the world has evolved is the brutality and the Holocaust. So we have to see that how we have imbibed the relationship within a society, the relationship within the family, they are also equally, influenced by those larger processes which are operating at the world level and which have shaped. So we have to see the societies across the world. They have various fault lines, because it is a society which is based on migrations, various kinds of interactions, various kinds of identities, and one of the dominant aspect of, as a social scientist, when we say that societies are largely, largely they are conflict ridden. And also, sometimes when we examine societies, maybe in certain time period, then we'd also find whether the societies are violence based society. Now, whether these issues which all of us and I will not raise certain issues, but the manner in which sometimes these kind of violence which we see in all social medias about various issues within India, outside India, etc., etc., we are witnessing all those kinds of violences. So it is not external to our existence, it is internal to, but then does our education address those anomalies, those contradictions which are existing and which are affecting our life very seriously? So so what is, so who should be the epicenter of our world? And now we have seen if you see Uttarakhand particularly, hardly, as far data is concerned, out of, and this is data which is not 2026 but previous data, where you find more than 12 lakh youths are eligible for the college going activity, but only 4 lakhs are able to enroll, and out of this 12 lakh people, only 9,000 are largely they are registered PhD student in Uttarakhand. So one of the important challenge in Uttarakhand is that most of the youths, they are they're unable to that. But as I said in the very beginning, that is not an issue that should be addressed. But then we are educated in so many ways, whether we are taking care of those dimensions, because majority of the people who go to the college, who do graduation, post graduation, then they enter into the market, they enter into the society, and some of them go to the higher education, at the level of research. But we need to address, our education has to address all those peoples, all those aspects of the people. So what is the point is what is the community? The one of the issue which we raised in the very beginning, which we the photo which I showed you. So what is a community and what is a society? What makes a society and what makes a community? And something inherent. So what do we say is that society exists in communication, right? See, we 4 people standing, sitting in a room for 100 years does not make a society until or unless people communicate, people, transmit their ideas, So prior to, and why should they transmit? Why should they communicate? Because you exist. There is a correlation between these 3 words: common, community, and communication. Your common, aims, beliefs, aspirations, when you have a participation in those processes which shapes the aims, beliefs, or aspirations of your society. So there has to be a communication, and when you have a participation, that what is the aim of a person who is standing in Uttarakhand, in any part of the Uttarakhand, or as a country, if we talk about India, how our beliefs or aspirations they communicate with each other, and by having that commonality of these dimensions, then a community exists, and that community exists when it is communicating. So education, presume education is premised. Education cannot exist in isolation. Education has to, if there is no dialogue, if there is no communication, there cannot be education. You see, education is not only transmitting the technical knowledge of something, but education has to continuously, uh, create dialogue and communication. Now, when education fails to create this dialogue and communications, right? When the societies are, as I said, there cannot be any society without communication. But then we generally classify societies on those many denominations, which creates, separate blocks of the society. We exist in so many blocks: X block, Y block, Z block, and people are communicating in X block, people are communicating in Y block, people are communicating in Z block. But the people of X block are not communicating with the Y block, people Y block are not communicating with the Z block. It doesn't make a society, because these three different blocks will not have any kind of common among each other, and therefore they will not be able to, so if our society is not based on communication, if the society is not based on dialogue, and if the education is not premised on these two components, dialogue and communication, then that society is anti-dialogical society, you see. And an anti-dialogical society is a society shaped by contradiction, and this society is a violence-based society, right? And therefore, and this violence is something which is not inherent to any society right now, but across the world you find that how over a period of time, the manner in which our evolution is being saved, it is largely becoming anti-dialogical. Now, when we refer to Paulo says that what has happened in the world history, that these contradictions, are being resolved in terms of by creating those spaces which are intentional institutions, right? Now, what is a school, for example? What is a college, for example? Or what is the ethics of a religion, for example? These are the spaces where where individual human beings participate into the activity, breaking down those limitations which does not allow communication and dialogue traditionally in the given society. For example, the manner in which we have evolved the education. For example, earlier you used to have different education for the boys and then different education for the girls. Then we emphasize that there has to be co-ed education, etc., etc. So, in every time period, society exists in those limitations, and those limitations narrow down the dialogue, the interaction of the people, and so the countries, they over a period of time develop various institutions, various spaces where people across denomination come together. And what happens in the school, what happens in the college, what happens in the university, that people from different denominations, they interact with each other. And when people across denomination, when they interact from different religion, different race, class, whatever may be the denomination, when people across denomination comes together, share a space, then they come to know each other in so many different ways, which are traditionally inhabited by the society because of the limitations imposed by the society. So beyond the textual knowledge, the space which is created by these institutions plays very, very important role in shaping our consciousness, because that space breaks the barriers of the dialogue and the communication. And I said in the very beginning, without dialogue and without communication, you may have n number of technical specifications, skill enhancement, etc., etc., but then it does not create a society, because if you are placed into those structures which does not allow you to communicate and dialogue and create a shared life among the various denominations, then you are not a society, and that society cannot be a productive society. So a society which is based on segregation, a society which is based on no dialogue, these are society which are based on race, caste, gender, or various structures which inhibit interactions, shared life. But there are spaces in the society which are school, college, collective cultural spaces, religious spaces, collective sign and symbols, which creates a shared life, which breaks the barrier. The so Paulo Freire argues, for example, he gives a very good example. If you say, for example, if a farmer is working with a horse is doing a work, you know, and after completing the daytime work, the horse is given food. Again, after giving the food in the post-lunch session, a farmer is getting work done by the horse, and then by the evening time, again he is giving food to the horse, and then horse is sleeping. Again, next very day, the horse is getting up. Again, he's going for the work for the farmer, and again the farmer is giving food, etc., etc. This activity does not create a shared life in the horse, because horse is doing a behavior, is doing a work in a mechanical manner, but it is not participating into a shared life, associated life, where he can think over it, where he can critically engage the life, where he can contribute meaningfully. So therefore, Paulo Freire says that education has a social function, and it cannot be treated only as as a training course, but it has to be trained in such a manner where where the people can live an associated form of life. But he also says, for example, he says there are various mafias and gangs. They have their fraternal feeling, but that doesn't make a society. They have a feeling within a particular group, but that does not create a dialogical society. So if a society has various species which are inhibited by the various identities, y, x, y, z, etc., etc., they have fraternal feeling among the groups, but those groups do not have the same fraternal feeling with the other groups, then it is not a society. It's not a dialogical society. It is an anti-dialogical societies. And here Paulo says, what is a violence? So there are different interpretations of the violence, but he says when you prevent somebody from the process of inquiry, it is an act of violence. If you stop somebody from critically examining, so Paulo says the education has to be a problem posing education. It has to demythalize the various concepts and words which have been told us, and we have to move away from this banking notion of the education, when we treat a student as something empty box, and where we go and teacher drops the knowledge, and then finally this dichotomy of teacher and student, and for example in the institutionalized manner, it has to be it has to be changed. And he says that the education has to be rooted with reference to the subject matter. If we have to conceptualize something about education in Uttarakhand, then it has to be rooted in the context of the subject matter which is existing in Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand cannot have an education policy which can be planned from the Delhi, remember. So Paulo says that largely our education is either based on the past or on the future, right? In terms of that, our education either celebrates our past, or it proposes solution of the problem in the future. And he says this kind of education is sectarian education. And what he says, that what we need is a radical education. What is a radical education? That when you try to correlate that education with your present problem. For example, the large-scale migration from the Uttarakhand of the people. People are migrating in large numbers. Why? And what is happening in education in Uttarakhand right now is a homogenized kind of development, for example. So that kind of so until or unless you connect the education with the present, how this present has been created, how the society is existing today as it has existed. So I have to question that, and how from henceforth I will move, which I want to see India, for example, after say 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and how I have seen India for say 50 years ago, or 80 years ago, or 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. My education has to be rooted in the existence, where we are, standing today. So irrespective of any kind of anti-ideological ism which are existing in society, we have to see what kind of fault lines are existing, and what kind of issues. For example, in today's society, for example, we are educated, and our educational capacity are enhancing. But what is happening? We are witnessing various kinds of brutal violence. For example, one aspect of society we have seen in recent times also, in how the women have been treated, or how the various, or how, for example, in the road rage kind of issues have been seen, the brutal killing and brutal acts of the human being. How do we explain that? Within the family also, for example, the recent case of the, one of the case of Rajasthan, where the, daughter has killed the mother, etc. So the point is that the violence is something, in the absence of dialogue and the absence of communication, has entered into life. So how, whether our education is taking into consideration those fault lines which are already existing in the society, or whether we are taking into considerations and making clear to the generation that how we are celebrating our 15 August 26 from the Red Fort, and why we are not celebrating from India Gate. Why India Gate is something which is the sign and symbol of the colonization, not the Red Fort, etc., etc. Or what is the difference between 15 August and 26 January, for example? One is the day of independence, when we got independent from the colonial people, and another is a day how we thought that how we will get organized after this independence. So for example, when we talk about, say, Sant Tukaram, for example, his texts were thrown into the rear. So it was an act of anti-dialogical society, right? But when we talk about Savitribai Phule, for example, when she worked for the education of the woman, for the child of the widows, she created a dialogical society. So we have to take into considerations those sign symbols and the part of the history which are creating a consciousness in the society about a dialogical or about anti-dialogical. For example, I'm giving another example of dialogical practices. When we talk about Guru Gobind Singh and the concept of Ape Guru Chela, he broke the boundary of the dichotomy of the teacher and a student, where a student become a teacher and teacher become a student. This kind of dichotomy is something which has evolved in India over a period of time. Or, for example, those collective practices, for example, when you talk about Sri Harmandir Sahib, where lakhs and lakhs of people are, being served and, food, and they are welcomed across the identities, across the, spaces for more than last 500 years. What can we learn from these practices? What does these practices inform us? Largely, when these issues of collective practices, dialogical practices, they are not part of an institutionalized education process, right? Because education is something which has transformed into a training process. But if we want to create a society in terms of a society which is meaningful in terms of communication, then we have to take into considerations that how our fault lines historically over a period of time we have converted them into a dialogical practices. But this continuous contradiction in society about dialogical practices and anti-dialogical practices, this is something which a education has to take into consideration. Now, for example, when we talk about Uttarakhand, for example, now Uttarakhand has evolved over a period of time, and what India can learn from Uttarakhand, right? One, and what is required from the India by Uttarakhand. These are two different things. Uttarakhand cannot be developed in the same manner. It has nature itself is a teacher in Uttarakhand, for example. Yeah, there are various folk traditions, religious worship traditions, which create connectivity, which create a larger sense of belonging in the Uttarakhand. Now, the challenge for education, for example, in Uttarakhand is how are we going to prevent and reproduce and produce these practices for the next generation, or the manner in which this a society which has lived in the with the nature, which have coexisted with the nature. Uttarakhand is a sign and symbol of for all of us, which has existed in the with the nature, it has protected the nature. But over a period of time, what has happened with Uttarakhand is that large scale of migrations and lack of basic, as I said in the very beginning, that there are those responsibilities which you have to perform and devote within the frame of the time. And then there are those responsibilities which you have to perform where time is not a factor to take into considerations. So those important responsibility of the life which every human being has to perform, somehow we have found over a period of time that Uttarakhand is facing that challenge. Now there may be many more challenges which I will not go into consideration, but I have not touched that area in detail. But somehow I have seen that the kind of sense of belonging which Uttarakhand has done, the kind of folk culture which Uttarakhand has preserved over a period of time, the kind of the gender relationship which Uttarakhand has developed over a period of time, the kind of sense of belonging which Uttarakhand has developed with the, because Uttarakhand is not a society which is dominated by the man, by the human being. It's a society which is dominated by the space inhabited by the nature and the other living beings. But what we are witnessing is now we are moving in that direction where we want Uttarakhand to be transformed into a space dominated by the structures created by the man. So we have to conceptualize. So I think I'm moving towards winding up this discussion of today is about our heritage and our memories and our history. That our journey, on journey of the world history, whether it's Latin America, Africa, or Asia, the journey of the world history, is a journey of dialogical practices. No doubt there were anti-dialogical practices, but over a period of time, societies, have existed and developed those practices. But what is happening after 1492, the manner in which the idea of modernism has been imposed on all of us, and the manner in which the idea of modernism has created a kind of alienation among all of us, among those practices which are something very crucial for the evolution of the human being, right? So I think our education somehow has to come out from those the frame of thinking as a human being. And once we are coming out of those frame of where we are placing the mechanical growth versus the existence of the living being, we have to see how this two aspect of the human being life has to be resolved. And once we work on that aspect, then we can create a good human being, and a good human being will be a human being which will be dialogue oriented. A good human will be a communication oriented, and a communication oriented society will not be a conflict oriented society. A dialogue oriented society will not be a self and other binary oriented society, and and this kind of dialogue and communication society will be a society free of the violence, a conflict less society, or a society which will be minimizing the emerging conflicts. Now in that kind of space, the capabilities of the human beings are going to be enhanced, are to be protected, are to be enhanced. And I think that is something within which we need to work out how our education has to be conceptualized. So I think with these words, let me wind up this today's my interaction with all of you. And if there will be any question answer session, then I'm there to discuss other or issues which may not have been able to discuss during this process of sharing my ideas. And definitely we will learn from each other during this question answer session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an insightful and thought-provoking lecture. Your reflections have encouraged us to think beyond conventional understandings of education and to appreciate the profound connections between history, heritage, community knowledge, and the development of human capabilities. Once again, thank you, sir. So now we shall move to the Q&A session. Participants are welcome to either raise their hands or they can type in their questions in the comment box, and we can proceed thereon. And also, like I said earlier, कि ये session द्विभाषी है, आप अपने सवाल हिंदी में भी पूछ सकते हैं. Yes, please.
Sir, may I?
Yeah, please proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Good evening for this. Thank you for this wonderful lecture. सर मेरा सवाल ये था कि मैक्स वेबर अपने टाइम पे कहते हैं कि एक देश के इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट के लिए स्टेट मोनोपोली ऑन वायलेंस बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है. तो आपके अनुसार सर कि क्या एजुकेशनल डेवलपमेंट के लिए भी स्टेट मोनोपोली ऑन वायलेंस उतना ही महत्वपूर्ण है?
You see, now it raises another dimension. How do we conceptualize a state? How do we conceptualize politics? Whether society is coming out of the politics or whether politics is coming out of the society. Now, our premise is that the fundamental correction has to be done at the level of how we nurture a human being and how we nurture the relationship of a human being with the existence, one. And once we have addressed this issue, then we have to take into consideration how we nurture the relationship of various human beings within a country, within a society, across the world. So out of these nurturing, the kind of processes which emerge, which can be called state, which can be called, political processes. So now, this raises a larger question that how you see this entire dimension, whether politics is development of society or society is developing out of the politics. My understanding is, one way of addressing this issue is that we have to see why politics is a reflection of society. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Okay. So I hope your question is answered. So we had Mr. Hitesh Thaplial raising his hand a bit earlier. So if you would like to ask the question.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Surendra, for the session. And my question is largely pertaining to the domain of education, since I'm a student of educational studies. So in your session, you talked about how modernism and modern societies are laden with inherent sort of violence and discrimination. But similar could be said about, indigenous ways of knowing or community knowledges as well, which might be laden with, caste-ridden, or could be laden with, could be gendered as well. So while arguing for community knowledges particularly, how do we make sure that we do not get stuck up on these, these inherent caste or gender biases that some of these ways of knowing have had?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. We know then it is. You see, for example, this program organized by SNEEHA, I was not very much aware about Sakti Balaji. I was not aware about Himanji, if I'm right. And I think they were not very much aware about me. Now, what has happened after this activity? We know each other much better. Now, their understanding about me and my understanding about them has, increased now. But you see, one aspect of the technology is that we become familiar. But we have to also see over a period of time that the technical presence of the human being and the presence of human being in person is something very different. We are always shaped by the presence of the human beings. Over a period of time, what has happened? Though that one aspect that because of technical field, now we can interact more and more online, but that is good. But we have to also see when the manner in this a talk or a discussion is organized in the presence of the human being, when we interact each other in person, then we come to know more about each other, right? So it is what you are saying that this idea of self and other, who am I and who are you? This violence emerges when this self and other is highly straight jacket and it is watertight compartment, and other is somebody, the other is never outside the self. The other emerges from within the self. If I say if a person says that I am a male, I have constructed this idea of a male, right? So woman does not exist outside me. Woman exists within me. How do I conceptualize those all living beings which are existing in the? So this idea of self and other is something, this gap between, you know, the self and other, that the others are good or they are bad, or me, I am a good and bad. This inherent subjectivism, I will not say biasness, this inherent subjectivism can be minimized the moment we expand those processes which initiate or intensify those process of interactions or communications. इसलिए हम कहते हैं कि आप जितना किताबों से नहीं सीखते उतना आप जो है ट्रैवल से सीख जाते हैं। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, है ना, बहता पानी और रमता साधु कोई मैला नहीं होता है, बहुत पुरानी कहावत है। तो वो क्यों नहीं मैला होता? क्योंकि आप जब जितना इंटरेक्शन करेंगे, जितने लोगों के साथ जाएंगे, हमारे सोचने के जो होराइजन्स हैं वो एक्सपांड होते हैं। And if you see the world leaders, those people who have contributed meaningfully, for example, जिन्होंने meaningfully contribute किया, देखेंगे वो लोग travel किए हैं, वो textual knowledge पे बहुत ज्यादा आधारित नहीं रहे। You know, Guru Nanak himself traveled more than 28,000 miles in his life, for example. तो ये बिल्कुल आप ठीक कह रहे हैं, बट उसको मिनिमाइज हम कैसे करेंगे? एंड दैट इज नॉट समथिंग वी शुड नॉट टेक एज अ प्रॉब्लम. Conflicts are inherent in the process of evolution. So there will never be a conflict-free society, but we can minimize the conflict. We can maximize the communication. This is how we can do. But then I'm not saying, and I don't believe in this, that we will be, because when you take conflict-free, then the point is that then you don't understand the nature of the human being, because the nature of the human being is a very complex. We are a very complex living being, and our decisions and our interaction with others are shaped by so many processes that the difference of perception is going to emerge. But what should be, as an academician or as a social activist or as a intellectual, what we can do? We can initiate those processes which minimize these gaps.
Okay, moving forward, we have Mr. Srihari here who wish to ask a question. Mr. Srihari, please go ahead.
I think mic is
Hello.
on. Yeah, unmute.
Yes, you're audible.
You have to unmute yourself, Srihari. You're muted.
Sir, I guess
Srihari,
might be a network issue. तब तक के लिए एक और है question. I think वो वाला कर लेते फिर then if he's available, so we'll proceed with that. So we have Miss Gunjan Farswan asking us, sir, what is the role of local communities in interpreting and managing their own heritage sites?
Yes. Yes. You see, one interpretation of local spaces which have been classified in terms of cities and the local areas is that I don't remember the name of the author, but he said city is a space of liberation. Why the author said city is a space of liberation, or the author has said city is a space which provides us infrastructure of liberation, right? So the heritage of the how we have to we have to create that heritage within a larger consciousness. We have to ensure that heritage is something because all heritage are collective heritages, evolved over a period of time. So we have to ensure that those heritages are not becoming part of our existing fault lines. Now, once our heritages are part of collective practices, then we have to see and we have to recognize that how those heritages, those practices, they contribute something very meaningful to our life. We have to relate that also. So, and then how it also, shapes the collective consciousness as a nation, right? So that is a larger role. So definitely those people who are situated in those areas, they have a very important role, because we cannot exist as a nation without consciousness. Remember, we cannot exist as a nation without our history. History is nothing but our, it is about a document of our shared past life, which we have, and from where we have evolved. So we cannot exist today as a nation if we don't have that shared life. those monuments or instruments of collective consciousness. So this sense has to be generated, and I think then whatever may be the elements of those heritages, they can meaningfully contribute to larger dimension as a society, as an individual, or as a nation.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So maybe I can come now. So I have some mic problem. So no, thank you very much, sir, for this very thought-provoking and philosophical discussion. And you are very right that unless people migrate, their broadness, their insight, and their openness, that normally doesn't come. A society which has a mixed population is always more receptive and accepting new ideas. That is true. But unfortunately, in recent days, if that logic stands true, we should not have seen the unrest in Europe or unrest in UK, because people who have migrated there, they are the people who have the maximum travel history. I mean, they have migrated from many countries, multiple countries. They have the experience of many countries. So I feel there is something lacking in terms of education, societal values, or maybe humanitarian values, and the type of education system that being offered by the government or by the countries. Is it religious-based education or spiritual-based education? So all these are factoring now, because we are seeing more demographic changes. Ideally, demographic changes should bring more openness, broadness, but what we are seeing, more narrowness is coming with the present societal demographic change. And that is what we are experiencing in Europe, we are experiencing in UK, and we are also experiencing in India. And so what you feel that what is the need of the hour? Is it only education, or is it, as you mentioned, politics out of the change, or change leading to politics? So these are some of the issues which we need to have some. I understand there is no answer, concrete answer, but how we manage our society and community in that sense. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate Sri Hariji, and thanks a lot for raising that issue. You see, fault lines, when we examine history, so fault lines have always existed in the societies. That is one part. It's a continuous feature of world society. We do not find any society historically which have existed without fault lines. And the issue is that how societies have, over a period of time, managed or resolved or minimized those conflicts. And we have various examples where we find. Since migration is a continuous process, and societies having different denominations is also a continuous process. So as I said, the one way which intellectuals have examined is something which has to be dialogue or communication oriented. That is the one part, so that we know each other more and more. Somehow over a period of time, our sense of belonging is moving away because of so many reasons, not because of demographies. For example, if you see any metropolitan, for example, within the life of a human being, let me say other way around, how technology has entered into our relationships, that we are moving far away from our relationships. For example, our more and more socialization with the technology, that is useful at certain point of time, but somehow it has mechanized our way of understanding. So that is the one part. but somehow our processes of understanding, एक वो कबीर का एक लाइन है कि मन नहीं रंगा रंगा लिया, कपड़ा राख लगाई तन में, है ना। रंगना तो मन को था, मन के बहुत तक रंग है, छिन छिन बदले सोई, एक रंग में जो रहे ऐसा बिरला कोई, कबीर ने ये भी कहा। ये डिजायर्स होती है। इंसान जब बच्चा होता है और जब वो बड़ा होता है तो फर्क यही होता है कि जब हम छोटे होते हैं हमारा शरीर छोटा होता है, फिर हमारा शरीर मैच्योर होता है, फिर हमारा शरीर जो है मैच्योर होके अपना काम पूरा करता है। शरीर तो खत्म होता है लेकिन डिजायर्स खत्म नहीं होती हमारी, क्योंकि शरीर के एक्सपांड के साथ डिजायर्स इतनी एक्सपांड हो जाती हैं कि शरीर खत्म हो रहा है लेकिन डिजायर्स अभी खत्म नहीं। दिस इज अ कॉन्ट्राडिक्शन इन अवर इवोल्यूशन प्रोसेस। तो खैर, द पॉइंट इज दैट व्हाट यू हैव ऑलरेडी सेड इज अ वेरी कॉम्प्लिकेटेड इशू, बट what we can do as a active people of the society, we can take up various dimensions which help us to understand this complexity, and all of us at our level when we address this issue, Guru Nanak साहब ने कहा मूत पुलिति कपड़ा होए ले साबुन धोए। अगर कपड़े गंदे हो जाएं तो हम साबुन से धो लेंगे, है ना, लेकिन मेरा मन और आत्मा अगर गंदा हो गया तो मैं कहाँ धोऊंगा उसको। वो धूपे नामे के रंग, वो कहते हैं कि वो तो उसकी कर्म जो काटना जिसे कहते हैं, वो तो ऊपर के लेवल पे जब हम चले जाएं तो जो बंधन और कर्म हम बना रहे हैं ना, बिकॉज ऑफ सो मेनी थिंग्स, तो अभी करेक्शन माइंड के लेवल पे होना है कि बॉडी के लेवल पे होना है कि सोल के लेवल पे होना है, या इससे और भी बेटर क्लासिफिकेशन हो सकते हैं। सो समथिंग आई थिंक वी आर सोसाइटी, एवरी सोसाइटी पास थ्रू डिफरेंट फेजेस व्हिच मे बी फेज ऑफ क्राइसिस, बट ये बहुत बिल्कुल आप ठीक कह रहे हैं कि जिस तरह की चीजें हो रही है, बट दिस इज समथिंग वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड that whether we consider this as a problem, of individual human being, one, whether we consider it as a problem of some particular community, two, whether we consider this as a problem of particular religion, three, there can be different dimensions. लेकिन let me go back to Guru Nanak, and when Babur invaded India, तो गुरु नानक साहब का रेफरेंस आता है कि वो कहते हैं कि बाबर के हमले करने के बाद में ना हिंदुस्तान में मुस्लिम अपनी नमाज अदा कर पाए, ना हिंदू प्रेयर कर पाए। दिस इज हाउ नानक क्लासिफाइड दैट लाइफ ऑफ ऑल पीपल वर कंपेल्ड, इट वाज फुल ऑफ पेन एंड एग्नी। तो ये प्रॉब्लम्स जो है बियॉन्ड डिनोमिनेशंस है, द इवोल्यूशन ऑफ ह्यूमन हिस्ट्री is full of those unique processes, but the way out, as you said, what is the way out? The way out is somehow our formal, informal, non-formal processes of education has to take into consideration these different complexity of the human being at the level of mind, body and soul. And I think gradually when we work out historically examining those processes, that how in the past we have addressed these issues, I think some light can be visualized by all of us, and something can be done meaningfully. One way.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Harini.
Okay, so as we move towards the conclusion of today's program, I would now like to invite Mr. S.S. Kandari, one of the founding members of SNEEHA, to deliver the concluding remarks. Please.
I think he's not here.
Seems some.
Mansi, Manish Ji Pal, he was interested or she was interested to ask some question. Is he here? Okay. So, as we bring today's webinar to a close, I send my heartfelt gratitude
and invaluable insights.
Thank you, sir, for encouraging us to reflect on the relationship between education, human capabilities, history, heritage, and community knowledge. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to Mr. Hemant Verma and Mr. S.S. Kandari, the founding members of SNEEHA, for their guidance, vision, and unwavering support in making today's program possible. My thanks also go to the entire SNEEHA team, whose dedication and hard work behind the scenes ensured the successful organization of this webinar. Finally, I would
I think voice is not audible.
this evening's discussion through your thoughtful questions and enthusiastic participation. We hope that today's conversation has inspired all of us to appreciate the transformative role of education, the enduring significance of history and heritage, and the value of community knowledge in shaping more informed, inclusive, and sustainable societies. With that, we come to the end of today's session. Thank you once again for being with
Thank
us.
you.
We look forward to welcoming you to the next edition of the Lok Vimarsha webinar series. Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and continue celebrating the knowledge, history, and heritage that connect our communities. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, sir, and goodbye. Thank you, Neha. Thank you, Tanya. Really, we are happy today. Today we had a very good and very knowledgeous discussion. I am not a student of history. I used to sleep when I read one page of history book since my childhood. So you can think of me, if I was very curious to listen to all this discussion, probably I have imbibed some interest by joining such type of discussion. But really, I will say that I am a student of pure science, that is medical science. We have also history, but that is related to medical history. Okay. But history speaks many things. Okay. And really, history, will go through the history and we try to know what was the history, then we realize our fault, our civilization, whether it was good, bad, or worst. But still, history is always needed. Whatever history we have, from that only we can know that nowadays, even if some people think of Ajodhya as myth, Ramji as myth, but for me he is, and that place is a history. I still have believed that all this, our mythological background, was history. Nowadays, I am trying to believe in that. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all of your dedication, hard work. I thank you again. Okay, bye.
Okay, the session has come to an end. You guys are free to leave. Thank you.